Welcome to today's library seminar. You're so money and you don't even know it, using bibliometrics and research evaluation to measure impact. I'm Lisa Clark, Outreach and Reference Librarian at the NOAA Central Library. This presentation is part of the Publishing at NOAA seminar series, which is put out by the NOAA Central Library. Our speakers today are Sarah Davis, Senior Bibliometrics Librarian, and Hope Shinn, Metadata and Public Services Librarian. Before we begin, let me go over a few logistical tips to help you enjoy our presentation. If you're having trouble with the audio or visual components of GoToWebinar, please log out and rejoin us. This resolves most technical issues. This presentation is being recorded and will be available on the NOAA Central Library YouTube channel, as well as the Library Seminars website later today. We will also be accepting questions throughout the webinar, which Sarah and Hope will address at the end of their presentation. Please feel free to type your questions in the questions chat box on the right side of your screen at any time. And last but not least, Sarah and Hope have shared their slides with you. If you're interested in grabbing them, please feel free to download them from the handouts menu on the right side of the screen. So with that, I thank you for attending this library seminar and turn the presentation over to Sarah.
Thank you, Lisa, and hello, everybody. So we're going to be talking about our bibliometrics program here at NOAA and what that means to NOAA Publishing and you guys. We're going to start with a brief primer on the basics of bibliometrics for those who are new to this, hopefully not too repetitive for anybody else, and then move into the meat of things about why this matters to you and what services our team can provide. We're also going to touch briefly on our data sources and some quick tips for managing your online scholarly presence. Next slide. Thanks. So let's get started with a basic definition. Bibliometrics is the scientific and quantitative analysis of scholarly research. It's using publications, generally speaking, peer-reviewed scholarly articles, as a proxy for measuring productivity and the impact of research. I've been muted, sorry. Here go back to, I always want to emphasize that bibliometrics is just one way we can create a narrative about a group or individual's research, but it's never the whole story. So it's one aspect of research evaluation, but it's increasingly widely used because it's, relatively speaking, easy to do in a repeatable, objective way, and it can be scaled up or down. We can look at what every researcher in NOAA is doing or how just one article is performing. So an imperfect but widely applicable tool. Next slide. Some basic tenets to keep in mind. Most bibliometric data sets have skewed distributions, so the average is not generally representative of the whole, and we try to account for that. Citation counts and behaviors vary a great deal between fields and also over time, which makes comparing research in different fields tricky. So things look different in mathematics as they do in, say, fisheries research. It moves at a different pace. We have to account for that. Publications also need at least 2 years to accumulate enough citations to provide meaningful analysis. This varies a little bit between different fields, but just because of the basic publication cycle that we've talked about in previous seminars of how long it takes to go through peer-reviewed, getting edits made, all of that on top of the research getting done, we're not going to be able to tell you anything about a publication that's just a year old or so. And certainly nothing any newer than that. Another thing, bibliometric indicators depend entirely on data quality. A good analysis requires a good data set, and there are a lot of factors that go into creating a good data set, like proper author and institution disambiguation and the quality of the publication index used. This is something we're going to talk a little bit about more later. Bibliometric indicators are imperfect and can really only be used for their specific purpose. For example, journal impact factor is something that's really only useful to evaluate journals, which isn't something that we do that often, except to select journals to publish in. And it's not useful to evaluate the papers in those journals and certainly not the authors of those papers. So the right tool for the job. Also, ultimately, there's no way to definitively know what a lot of these indicators are measuring. Specifically, high citation rates don't necessarily correlate to credibility, although we use them often as a proxy for a measure of quality. So just some things to keep in mind. And all of these factors are why we use as many indicators as are applicable and provide as much context as possible to create our narrative. There's no one number that you can point to that will tell you everything you need to know. Next slide. The metrics or indicators that we use can mostly be divided into two different categories: descriptive metrics, which measure productivity, and evaluative metrics, which measure impact and theoretically quality. Impact is probably more accurate though. Productivity metrics tell us what and how much is being published and includes publication counts and various breakdowns of these counts by things like year and subject category, what office is involved, the journal title, things like that. Impact metrics tell us how publications are actually being used by other researchers. So indicators like citation counts, H-index and variations of H-index, percentile rankings, which compare a paper to other papers published in the same field in the same year, which is useful for comparing across fields and over time, and also analyses of the papers that cite your papers. Looking at those papers and doing those publication breakdowns can give a lot of insight into how things are actually being used in the community. Next slide. We also do collaboration and network analyses, and I put them together because they do have some overlap. More and more, we're looking at how often researchers are collaborating and who they're collaborating with. So we can provide collaboration rates, like the percentage of articles in a given set that are a product of authors affiliated with institutions in other countries, for instance. We can also look at a network of who's collaborating with who. We have an example here of collaborations between NOAA labs and divisions in articles published in fiscal year 2018. And we do something similar for networks of authors as well, like the authors' names. We do a number of other network analyses, most commonly semantic networks. So looking at what words frequently co-occur in article titles, abstracts, keywords, which can give some insight into the key research areas a group is working on, and the intersection and overlap of those research areas. It also just looks pretty cool. We can give word counts. It's like a word cloud with connections. It looks neat. Less frequently, we analyze networks of co-citations to examine the networks of papers that cite the same resources or are cited by the same publications, which provides some insights into fields of study and can be a way to detect emerging areas of research. These aren't as common. They're obviously a lot more complicated than publication counts, but they can be quite useful. Next slide. There are a lot of different metrics available, and while we mostly stick to just non-proprietary options, it's still a lot of options, and it's important to pick the right metrics for the job. This chart breaks down that concept a bit, and you'll see that there's a lot of overlap. For instance, publication and citation counts can be used when looking at an individual's work, as well as a group's, or when looking at a whole field of research. But a metric like H-index really doesn't apply to either individual publications or a research landscape. So if you want to look at everybody studying sub-seasonal research, who's, what's being done in those areas, H-index just really isn't going to tell you much of anything there. Next slide. So I mentioned earlier the need to have quality data source in order to get a good metric. Our team uses Web of Science and other tools in the Web of Science universe, including Insights and EndNote, to do the vast majority of our data collection and analysis. We've done some testing comparing them to other tools and services, and we have a lot of confidence in their accuracy and coverage. So although their coverage isn't 100%, our tests show that it is very, very good. And we've yet to see any tool that has better coverage of NOAA publications. We always want to have the most complete list when we're looking at a set without many gaps, whether that list is provided by an office or individual or from our searches on Web of Science. These tools are available NOAA-wide, and if you're interested in working with them yourselves, we're always happy to help you. We have training we can provide. We can connect you with the vendors to provide training. We can provide you with data sets to play around in there. Insights has tiles that we can set up for you. We're very happy to help you if you want to do some of this work yourselves or have us do it. We do get a lot of questions about why we don't use Google Scholar. You may have experienced looking at your Google Scholar profile and some of the numbers are higher there than what you'd see in Web of Science and wondered why we don't use those. So the content in Web of Science is highly curated and has a high degree of quality control. And there's a lot of transparency about how data is selected and made available and processed. And unfortunately, that's just not true of Google Scholar. There isn't a panel of experts who select what journals are indexed and make sure that every article is indexed with author disambiguation and keywords and citations. It's all done by algorithms, and those algorithms are imperfect. Imperfect is probably a little generous. So there's some concerns with publications getting double counted if they're available in more than one place, and things getting counted that maybe shouldn't, like drafts of articles or blog posts, which are not things that you would want to include in a bibliometric analysis. There's also some utility issues in that it's very difficult to collect and download your data to use in anything else. So just getting like a CSV of articles, it's very messy, it's very hard to use, and it makes independently verifying the metrics, which is something that we like to do, virtually impossible. So that's why it's just not something that we in the library tend to use for analyses. We have used it to identify publications to include in bibliographies and to look at, but as a tool for regular analysis, it's just not for us. So I hope that answers questions. If you have more, please ask them. And now I'm going to pass things over to Hope, and she's going to talk to you about why this all matters to you and what sort of things we can help you with. Hope.
Great. Hi, everyone. Sarah said I'm Hope Shinn. I'm another Bibliometrics and other librarian at the Central Library. So why should you care about bibliometrics? Sarah sort of covered this a little bit, but I want to talk more about what exactly bibliometrics can help you do in your career. So first, it can help you better understand your work and impact. It can show you who's citing and using your research. Is it being used? What field is it being used in different fields than you might expect? It might suggest authors that you could collaborate with in the future, and that sort of thing. It can also give you some understanding of trends. So these are some trends within maybe your research area, like are a lot of people looking at this one particular area, or it could be understanding of trends within your own research. You can see which of your publications gets the most citations, and then maybe you can think about why certain papers are more impactful than others. I mentioned this, but you can get a better picture of your research landscape, not just in terms of trends, as in what other people are starting to research, but also like what's the normal number of citations? Do you get more citations than most of your peers? Do you get fewer? Are you publishing in the same journals? And I'm talking more in terms of an individual researcher for the last 3 points. But for offices, you can do kind of the same analysis. You can evaluate the performance of researchers that say you're funding. You can see if the research that you're funding is being really impactful, if it's getting cited a lot, or if it's not. And it can help you also set goals. So you can say, like, we really like to start funding in this specific area because we saw that more people are doing research in this area and we think it's really interesting. We'd like to move our research funding that way. And then going back to individuals, it can also provide you concrete numbers to illustrate your research impact. So it does obviously give you sort of like the fuzzier ideas of like who's doing what, but also it can give you actual numbers to put in your performance review. You can put your H index in your performance review. You can say, I've published this many articles over the last 5 years and they've gotten this many citations and I'm in the top 10% of authors in my field in terms of citations. Yeah, and that can really help you in performance review or even just to put on your own personal website if you do any sort of online outreach. Next slide. So in terms of online outreach, there's some really simple steps you can take to take control of your papers and your identity as a researcher. One of the ways to do that is to get a unique author ID like ORCID or researcher ID or both. This is basically a way to associate all of the articles that you actually published and also other publications, and ORCID lets you add not just articles you published, but also any peer review work you've done or conference presentations and that kind of thing. And it can help differentiate you from another researcher who has the same name, for example. Like if you're one of the thousands of Mike Smiths in the world, you want to make sure that when people are looking at your articles, they're actually seeing what you've published and they're not confusing you with a different Mike Smith who may work in the same field or not. Both researcher ID and ORCID ID work the best when you keep them updated. So every time you put something new out, make sure it's matched with your ID. And you can also put your author IDs in your email signature. You can give it to your journal publisher when you're publishing a journal article, and they can put it on their website, and that makes it even easier to link you to your other work. And you can also put it on presentations as well. Again, in a sort of self-promotion kind of way. If you have a personal website or you have a Twitter profile or something, and you're really trying to get more exposure for your work, linking publicly to an ORCID in particular, since it's publicly accessible, can really help increase the visibility of your work online. In addition, you can also claim Google Scholar and Amazon author profiles. Sarah already talked about why we don't use Google Scholar in our own bibliometric analysis, but you do want to make sure that what Google Scholar says you've published is what you've actually published. So you can go in and claim your ID. And the same with Amazon. Amazon, obviously, more if you've published books rather than articles. And another great thing you can do for visibility is to make your data sets publicly available. This will really help associate not just your actual publications with yourself, but all of the other background work that goes into your paper. Data sets can really help people that are using your research in their own research, so they don't have to go hunting for that. And it can also show if a lot of people are using the same data sets. That can also be good information to know. And finally, we'd really like you to submit your work to the institutional repository, not just because it's our institutional repository, but it also means that anything you publish is going to be publicly available, and it's going to be publicly available from a trusted source that is associated with your professional identity as a NOAA researcher. So this is especially true if you're publishing articles or in journals that aren't open access. You can often put manuscript versions of your papers in the institutional repository, and that can help make your research more visible and also more available for authors and researchers that don't necessarily have access to the publications that you're publishing in. So we can help you set up ORCID and researcher IDs, and we also have a variety of other services and products. Next slide, please. There is some overlap between what we can give individuals and offices and programs. Specifically for offices and programs, we can give publication and citation analysis reports. So these are going to be sometimes nice looking PDF reports that have like lots of charts and some narrative analysis of the actual numbers that we're showing. But we can also produce sort of simpler Excel files that have charts as well as the raw data. We can also pull publication lists and raw data from Web of Science for you without doing necessarily any analysis, and just send that information to you for you to use as you need. And outside of like nice polished publications, we can also provide, just some charts and some data for you to put in your own reports and presentations. Like, we're more than happy to make something for you that's fully, like a PowerPoint presentation that's fully polished and looks really nice. But if you'd rather just have the charts and information for you to make your own presentation or PDF document or whatever it is, we can give that to you as well. And for individuals, we've got this nice 2-page PDF called an Researcher Impact Report. And this is a document that is supposed to give an overall snapshot of your work as a researcher. So this has the number of publications that you've published, including perhaps things that aren't in Web of Science, such as NOAA tech memos, grade literature, or book chapters. And then we'll also give numbers like your H index, the number of citations you have, if you have any particular highly cited papers that you'd like to highlight, and we could show the number of papers that you've published in particular research areas. And then if you ask us for that product, we then send it to you as a PDF, and you can print it out and put it in your office, or you can put it in your performance review or up on your website or anything like that. And in addition to that beautiful polished PDF, we can also give you, again, just the analyses and just the visualizations if you'd like to create your own report or presentation from that. And in addition to these services for offices, programs, and individuals, we are also able to do analyses of individual publications. So if you'd like to know everything there is to know bibliometrics-wise about a particular journal article, if there's you think there's one really impactful article that say your office has published or that you've published, you can reach out to us and we can give you a report, visualizations, whatever it is for those individual publications. And then next slide. Here we just have some images of our services. So see the image of the Researcher Impact Report on the right. You can see a more high quality zoomed in image of that on our Bibliometrics page on our website. And then some examples of what the full reports look like, as well as our visualizations. So you can see in the visualizations, there's a small office collaboration chart, as well as a international collaboration heat map and a simple bar chart. Next slide. So if you've been listening to this presentation and you thought this sounds great, I would love to get this from me or my office, how do I do that? Here's how. You can visit our LibGuide for more information about our services. And if you're just ready to go ahead and get started, you can email us either at library.bibliometrics@noaa.gov or you can email Sarah individually. That's her email there. We will note that if you want a researcher impact report, you must already have an ORCID or researcher ID that is fully up to date, so we know what your papers are. You know, we can pull a list from Web of Science of what Web of Science thinks you published, but that might not necessarily be accurate. So we need you to verify that by having an up-to-date ID. And in addition, unfortunately, researcher impact reports can really only give good data about your research career if you have more than 10 publications that were published over 2 years ago, because it does take time for papers to accumulate citations, which is why we have the 2 years requirement. And then the 10 publication requirement is just because if you have fewer than 10 publications, we can't necessarily get meaningful information out of that. We can tell you, you know, the number of citations you've gotten, your H index, and that kind of thing, but there's not a whole lot of, it's not enough meaningful data to really draw any conclusions or do any analysis with. So we are working on getting some kind of product for new career researchers. So if you have any suggestions, we'd love to hear them. Or if there's anything in particular that we don't offer that you would love to see, please also reach out to us. We are more than happy to hear what you need and to work with you as well. Next slide. In December, there's going to be a seminar about Sherpa Romeo. I think Sarah can talk more about that. And I think we're ready for questions, if there are any.
Thank you. Audience, we have lots of time, up to half an hour to take your questions. So go ahead and look to the right, and under the questions chat box, go ahead and enter them, and I will read them to our speakers today.
Sarah, did you want to say anything else about the Sherpa Romeo seminar?
Oh, the Sherpa Romeo seminar, yeah. So Sherpa Romeo is a tool to check copyright restrictions and permissions for different journals and publishers. So you can find out what exactly you can do with your article once it's published, whether or not it can be included in the IR, whether or not you can put it on your website, if you just give it to everybody you want. So Jan Thomas from our College Park Library is going to have a bunch of information about that. They have a new interface at Sherpa Romeo, and it is different to navigate if you haven't experienced it before. So he's going to be walking people through that, and I'm pretty excited. So that's the deal with the Sherpa Romeo.
And Lisa, if you want to move to the next slide, that has
Sure.
all of our emails.
So far, no questions. Another quick point I want to make is that if you joined us late, we do have the slides from today's presentation attached to this presentation as a handout. So look to the right, there's a drop-down menu called Handouts, and you can download the PDF of the slides that were presented today. All right, I'm not seeing any questions. Ladies, do you have any last comments?
I don't.
Sarah? No? Sarah?
I keep muting myself. My only comment is that if you have any questions at any point, feel free to email us. We will try to answer them. We hope that this gave people some things to think about. We do a lot of different things, and we are always interested in figuring out new services that we can provide that will meet your needs. So don't hesitate to ask if there's something that we can find out about. And we are working more and more with trying to do some analysis of NOAA publications, so not articles, but tech reports and memos, and to some extent, data publications using the tools that we have. It's a little more limited, but it is something that we are working hard to develop and get that available for you. So if you would like to know more about that, please let us know.
I just entered at the request of one of our audience members, the library.bibliometrics@noaa.gov email into the chat. So if you want to just copy that, and that would hopefully that will be helpful. If you're interested in asking a reference question, of course, there's also the library.reference@noaa.gov, or any general question for NOAA Central Library. And then, of course, NOAA repository, noaa.repository@noaa.gov. All right, well then, thank you very much to both of you for your expertise and your time today discussing bibliometrics. I appreciate it so much. Another reminder that this was recorded, so if you know anyone who might be interested in the bibliometrics topic, please share the link with them. I'm going to be uploading the webinar today to our YouTube channel at NOAA Central Library, as well as the Library Seminars website. Thank you again, Sarah and Hope, and also to our audience. Thank you for joining us for this library seminar. I hope you'll join us again, and be well, everybody.
Thank you, Lisa.
Bye.